There's this trend that I noticed from the latest hero shooter game Marvel Rivals that is near identical to Overwatch. Yes, there are other games with this problem, but I mainly want to focus on Marvel Rivals because they are constantly getting compared to each other because they are very, very similar. The problem that I'm talking about is the number of damage heroes compared to the other two roles and the problem and dynamics that it creates. There was another YouTuber that made a video similar to this one a couple of months ago, and I'm going to give his link in the description because I'm going to be using some of the same points he is throughout the video. In Overwatch and Marvel Rivals, you have there being more damage heroes than support and tank combined on launch. And this is a trend that I don't like seeing, especially as a Vanguard / tank main. Even though I would consider myself a flex player who can play all roles. So I would say I'm experienced enough to talk about it from the damage character perspective and on the outside looking in. And also, side note, I'm just going to be referring to them as DPS, tank, and support. So when you're playing DPS, it is like, you know what, let me just play who I'm going to play, and that's fair. But on the outside looking in, when you have 5 players immediately insta-lock to damage, it can be very disheartening. And it's not a good look to have to insta-lock a certain role to be able to play. That means there are too many damage characters. There's so many to choose from, they have more variety and more choices. If the roles were spread evenly, we wouldn't have this big of a problem. This is especially not helped when we are getting 2 damage to 1 support and tank characters with the Fantastic Four, which is already double the amount. I heard Rivals was planning on releasing a new hero every 6 weeks, and in order to not have such a disparity, you have to focus on the tank and support roles by not releasing any damage characters in the meantime. It took 8 years for the tank role in Overwatch to have as many heroes as the DPS did on release. Overwatch 2 went 2 years from Sojourn's release to Venture's release, and 3 heroes went by without releasing any damage heroes. I really wanted Mr. Fantastic to be a tank, especially with his kit, but at the very least he plays as a hybrid tank. But this is what I mean by the damage role gets favoritism. They're already seen as the default role, especially like with the tutorials. You have like Soldier 76 and Punisher, even though that's kind of like the role is pretty simple when you break it down. It's just shoot anything that moves. Even though this is not a problem Rival or Overwatch can control directly, it's just that damage players translate easier from other games. The hero shooter genre in and of itself is more complex than COD or Battle Royale or tactical shooter. There are a lot of moving parts, and it takes game sense that takes time to develop. You can get away with just having good aim up until a certain point. It also doesn't help that the damage role is seen as flashy and fun and the role that makes the big plays. The other roles are not advertised as such, especially when you have a chance to make big plays, albeit they may be a defensive play. But the damage heroes kits have abilities that benefit them versus the team for the most part. And a lot of things can be said about Overwatch that, oh, the tank was born to play, which I strongly disagree with. But some of the sentiment that players feel should go to the developers. You can't just give the damage characters everything and then give everybody else the scraps. There has to be a character or something that appeals for the non-tank players and all roles for that matter. Because if you really ask me, I think everyone should know how to play at least one character in each role, especially in comp, but maybe that's the flex in me, I don't know. Do you know how many times in Overwatch when we would ask somebody to play support and they did know how to play a certain role? That's why I was somewhat glad when they added role lock, because now we know who's playing what role, no questions asked. And we don't have to beg someone to play second healer or second tank. Outside of GOATs, people were just tired of the 1-4-1 composition. Even though I'm not pro or against Marvel Rivals getting a role lock, I can see why Overwatch did. And this argument really isn't anything new. We've been down this road before. And let me speak on this real quick with the queue times and such that happened in a role lock. One of the arguments or whatever that Blizzard had for switching to 5v5 was the queue times. And the queue times for the DPS specifically, they were too high. People had to wait 10 minutes and such. Okay, sure. But then the report came out with the queue times showing the numbers. The problem wasn't that no one wanted to play tank. It's just that everyone wanted to play DPS because the tank and the support roles were not that far off from each other. And when I was playing Overwatch 1, even towards the end, the max I would wait for a support was 5 minutes. The DPS role is the only outlier. This was a problem that Blizzard created, and NetEase is headed down that same path. You cannot have an uneven disparity and expect equal or near equal distribution between all three roles. That's almost a little insane because the demand for DPS will always be higher. This is what I'm saying by 1-4-1 was very common and competitive. And this is how the story went out. You would have 3 people, insta-lock damage, and it's like, okay, some pick support, some pick tank. You're debating on whether you need a second tank or a second healer, and then the last person selects DPS. You get on the mic, you're like, hey, can someone switch? And someone is telling you very aggressively that they have played 5 support games in a row and they are tired of supporting and they are not swapping. And here's the thing. You don't necessarily want someone to play a role that they are not willing to play, because then that's just going to hurt the team more because they aren't going to do as well. And sometimes 1-4-1 can work, but you're only as strong as your weakest link or issue. Especially in a game like this where you're relying heavily on your team. Every once in a while, you might get a LeBron James on your team. He can carry. And you can out-triumph the lack of second tank or second support. Other times, you will be the 2023-24 Phoenix Suns. And let me explain. How I always thought about it was that the point guard is a support. You're setting up your teammates, you're getting assists, you're making the games easier for them, and somewhat setting the pace, at least in the hero shooter genre. The centers and the power forwards are the tanks. They're physical, banging down low, getting rebounds, setting screens. They're seen as someone who protects the rim or the paint, and in this case would be your teammates. And this is traditionally speaking. And the other 2 positions are just getting buckets. And the DPS are the other 2 positions, just get buckets / get kills. They may be asked to help, facilitate, or crash the glass more, but for the most part, go out there, get kills, get buckets, score. The problem with the Phoenix Suns was that they had too many scorers. They played the same way. So it's like you have 4 hit scan DPS. So like Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. Their playstyle is similar. They essentially did not have a point guard. So in this case, they didn't have a healer on their team, and they're asking them to share ball handling responsibilities. So that's like asking one of your DPS characters to switch to support and they play Moira, but they still primarily damage while throwing out a heal orb here or there. The Suns also did not have much size, and they were losing the rebounding battle, aka the front line. So this is basically like having a Roadhog on your team as the only tank. And to paint the picture, their comp would be consisted of Roadhog, Soldier 76, Ash, McCree, Sojourn, and a DPS Moira. You can maybe get by in a regular season, aka quick play. But in the playoffs, that's not gonna slide. Because the Phoenix Suns end up getting swept. And that is a long explanation of me basically saying why comps matter. And I promise you I'm not trying to dunk on DPS players. But historically speaking, the damage role can be seen, at least in my eyes, as a little selfish. I will say there has been non-DPS problem with GOATs where it was just like, we're just going to out-sustain you, so there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm also not getting on here and saying that 2-2-2 should be the standard. It's just the most balanced, at least how I feel. I mean, there's room for other comps, 3-2-1, 1-3-2, or 1-2-3, all that stuff. But with that being said, I just don't know what type of heroes NetEase plans on releasing. They have the entire Marvel Universe at their fingers, so who knows what type of characters, kits / playstyles they could have available in the future. Because it does seem like they are blurring the lines a little bit between the roles, so NetEase may not run into that same problem as Blizzard. Also, to end this video off for the newer players who are only playing DPS characters at the moment, because is enjoyment in enabling your team, not trying to speak in basketball terms again, but other roles have impact as well. It's like getting 15 rebounds or 20 assists. You do feel the gratitude after the game. One of my fondest memories as tanks was when we were playing on the Egypt map in Overwatch 2nd Point. The game is either going into overtime or really close. And this McCree ults, I turn around and bubble him, you know, doing my tankly duties, protecting my teammates. And 3 different forms of CC went flying towards him. And he was able to get his ult off because I bubbled him. And he ended up getting 4 people with his ult, winning us the game. And he was so glad that I bubbled him. It was actually really funny because I've never had someone have that reaction before. But these are the moments that I live for. Did that player get played again? Yes. But was that really the play of the game? That's something to think about right there. But let me get off y'all's screen. I feel like I've been talking enough. Thank y'all for watching. Please leave a like, rate, subscribe. Peace and chicken grease.